Renate, are you starting?
Lorna is starting.
Oh, I'm starting. Okay. Oh, well, hi. Thank you, everybody, for coming. So nice to see you all. So our topic is about addiction, but, you know, it's not the main addictions we're talking about. I wrote a book, and so did Renate. My one's Living in 3D, Drink, Drugs, Denial. Renate wrote a cracking book called Cheers, The Hidden Voices of Alcoholism. Renate and I actually met in another group doing another thing where I came to know about her book, because part of that group that we were in was we were sharing books that we had left. So I bought her book. I don't know even how long ago that was, but then we connected as friends, and how we would be, so we shared some stories around that, and I was in the process of still writing my book at that time, because for me, while I was writing my book, it took me 7 years, because another addiction flared up in my family, which had been denied. And so my whole family just blew up in the middle of me writing this book. And we're coming back down to earth a little bit now. However, it's still denied, this other addiction. And so for me personally, my own deep denial around others' addictions, and my own addiction was overthinking. Still is. It's just overthinking, constant overthinking things, and I'm addicted to that. So that's what we mean about, addiction. A lot of people just think it's in terms of maybe alcohol or other substance abuse or gambling or sex or shopping. But I think there's so many more subtle underlying addictions that we don't even maybe know about or think about. And when it came up to have a discussion around that, for me personally, I see the addiction of blaming and shaming and finger pointing at everybody in a lot of groups that I'm involved in, and in feeds on Facebook. I think everybody's stuff's coming up, and it's just been played out in that field. And I laugh about things now, whereas I had come to a point I was married to an alcoholic, and then I moved into another relationship with another alcoholic, which he was a very violent one. Yet I had been the aggressor in the first relationship. So when I came by the time I was on my knees through living with others' addictions, not looking at myself, the biggest epiphany for me was somebody saying, that finger you're pointing at them, there's 3 pointing back. That was a massive thing for me at the time. And I still hold that true. When I hear myself, I've got a teacher just now that says that you're better to be fucked up and aware than to be fucked up and pretending to be aware. So, and I always hold that one close, because it's like, oh yeah, that's good. And he talks about addictions as well, and that's where I learned about this thing, and it's in the human brain. It's in us all to have something that we can, my addiction at the moment is about making money. So how can I make money? Because my income streams have stopped, and I've become bloody obsessed with it, and in my desperation, I'm not making any. So I'll shut up now, and I'll hand over to my dear friend Renate. I go off on a tangent.
Oh, don't worry. Yeah, Lorna, first of all, thank you for you all to be here, and those who watch later maybe. So I'm Renate, I'm in Spain. For the occasion, I put this painting up, which is about friends, women who connect, so I thought it was appropriate. The colors are not so good. I've got a new camera. I'm a bit sharper, but the colors, it aids the colors a bit, but never mind. This is about addiction, and this is also maybe a little bit of an addiction that we all have, to try and look good and see where can we hold the camera to get rid of this and all that. I don't know, addiction is a big subject. Lorna and I, yes, we met in this video posting 30-day challenge, and one day I posted my book, Cheers, The Hidden Voices of Alcoholics. However, I've re-edited it now and revised, and it's now relaunched. The new version is called Breaking the Silence, One Voice at a Time. I decided to relaunch it because some stories were outdated. The reason being, there's the difference between, I think Lorna and I have both written books about addiction. So first have a little bit about the addiction to alcoholism. I'll first talk a little bit about that, and then my idea about other sorts, how that sort of connects to us all in a certain way. So Lorna, I would say, if and correct me if that's not true, Lorna, your book is about you and your story, and it's very powerful, and it can be very helpful for other people to read how Lorna has dealt with it, how she come out of that. For my book, and I wrote it actually in 2011, I interviewed 40 people. Now, I have lived with an alcoholic for 12 years, and because he was a functioning alcoholic and binge drinking, mostly only when he was free, he was drinking. It was still horrible. He was very abusive to me, not physically, but certainly verbally. And but I felt really frustrated because people said, why don't you dump that loser? What an idiot. And it's not that black and white. And that prompted me to ask other people, but because I always talk about my problems. I'm not the one who stays silent, to be honest. I talk with friends. I want to get rid of my problems by talking. And then my book was written in 3 months, because people came to me. They said, I heard you wrote a book about alcoholism. My partner or my mother or my son or my whomever was an alcoholic. And then my idea was created that I would write their stories anonymously, but in the first person. But I also interviewed alcoholics themselves and people in the healthcare world. So my book is more like short stories of people. It's still stories written as a story. And my story is in there as well. A few actually of my stories, but all anonymous. And my book was also used by the British government as a testimonial in 2012. It's still on the parliamentary website, actually. But I think both Lorna and my book are books that can help people reflect on their situation, because when you're in a situation like that, many of us get into a situation of shame. People are afraid to talk about it. And my problem with especially the alcoholism subject, the most media, they talk about the alcoholic. So it's about what the problems are in the UK situation. What are the problems for the NHS and, you know, the drunks coming in and all that, the burden on the NHS. But what is totally forgotten is the group surrounding the alcoholic. And if you know that one alcoholic affects at least 6 people in their immediate surroundings, Lorna says even more. And out of 5 people, 2 will be affected at some stage in their life by alcohol abuse of some form. Could even be a drink and drive accident. So this whole fact that so many people are affected is not taken seriously. And there is, I believe, a huge burden on the NHS and health sectors also in my country. And for my book, I interviewed people throughout Europe, also from Germany, Norway, Denmark, UK and Ireland. But I believe it's such a universal problem, and it's not included. And so people who are with a partner who's an alcoholic do have health effects from that. They might be very stressed. Stress creates problems. And so they also go to the doctor, but they won't tell that little bit. They just say, doctor, I'm stressed, or I have a problem, or I have whatever they have. So I believe there's an indirect problem on the NHS. So that's a long story, a little bit about the alcoholism. But I also feel like what Lorna just said, we all, I kind of would call it an addiction gene, because we only have to look around us, everybody with their phones, it's huge, it's everywhere. And we mostly aren't aware of it. And I remember I lived in Italy 20 some years ago, and I remember the first Italians with these mobile phones in the street. And I thought, what bloody idiots with these mobile phones talking in the street. And now look what world we live in. And It is kind of weird, but there are more addictions, and many addictions. You can be addicted to an alcoholic, for example. That's a problem of many people who live with an alcoholic. But I certainly have a problem with food. For me, that's also an addiction. And I believe it's a very wide thing. And I'd like to kind of talk about this whole subject, but also, I don't know, because there's more women here and there's other forms of addiction, but for me also, I do get back to alcoholism now. How many women are affected? There's many women drinkers, and I don't know. And so it's not just being affected by your partner being alcoholic, but also women who are the alcoholic. And I think it's a huge subject, and I am interested to hear what other people are saying. If you have a view either on the alcoholism subject, or if you want to bring in another subject, and how we could also maybe help each other, because that's something I think we should do. Be there for each other, as my painting says. Reach out your hand, and yeah, maybe it's just listening. Maybe it's giving some good advice. Maybe it is through a book, whether it's my book or Lorna's book. It helps. It helps when you hear somebody else's story. It helps when you read it or hear it or talk about it. And it also helps when people listen to you. So I think that's enough from me. And I'd like to open up the space. And if somebody wants to say something, maybe you can, Sandy, okay? Please go.
Thank you. I've got a question. Well, I've got two things that I've scribbled down, but the first one's a question. When would I know that I'm addicted, as opposed to it being a repetitive behavior? What's your thoughts on that? Either of you, Lorna or anybody.
A really good question. It's a really good question, because that's what keeps people in their addictive place. So it's define addiction, but everybody's different. You know what I mean? It's people have different thoughts on that. Like Renate just said, I mean, I was addicted to my alcoholic, my second one especially. I left the first one. I had the sense that he's still drinking today. I mean, he's the father of my daughters, but he doesn't think he's an alcoholic. He just thinks he's got a problem. You know, it's like define alcoholism as well, because you know, in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, there's 4 types of alcoholic. So when I was going through my own stuff, because I got to a place of can't beat them, join them, I read that big book, and I mean, that the 4 types I could identify in them all, apart from the last one, which was stage 4, the chronic. Like you get 4 stages of cancer, 4 stages of, which is the chronic stage. So, you know, I could have said I was borderline. But then in my recovery, I went through another phase of experiencing what it must be like. So, like, even for when I stopped smoking, I was like, what's an addict and what's a bad habit? And so they decided for me that I had a really filthy habit. I wasn't an addict, cigarettes, whereas I would have said I was an addict. So I don't know if I'm answering I can't answer your question, because it's for you to answer it. Renate might have something different to say, but I've been in and around them forever in this lifetime. You know, alcoholism's been my whole, even growing up, which I hadn't known about until I really woke up to the whole situation, because it had been such a fun part of my early life. It only became an issue in my later life with, you know, been married to somebody who's drinking, whereas I was brought up that alcohol was fun and good crack, and you know, you worked hard all week so you could party all weekend. And I mean, as a teenager, you may go through phases and dabbling in it, and then, you know, so I was called a weekend alcoholic by my friends. They called me the weekend alkie. I was quite proud of that label. You know, because I was just a party animal and I loved it, and I thought I deserved to go out and have a good time, and it wasn't a problem then. You know, my kids I never went out unless they were washed, bathed, and went to bed, you know, and I had the proper babysitter for them. It didn't become a problem for me until I was involved in a bad car accident. I didn't know the emotional stuff that had gone on in the childhood that had led to that point. For me, you know, it's not about them, it's about me, and that they're suffering just as much, and I didn't know, but because, and a lot, you know, Renate mentioned the NHS don't recognise it as an illness. However, they still give extra money to the ones that are on benefits because they've got an addiction. So define alcoholism, define an addiction, and you know, if you're an addict, you'll get more money.
Wow. Talk about keeping people in a loop.
Sorry.
Could it be that you know, not all habits are bad? We can have good habits as well as bad. So the addiction would be if it was destructive or creating some kind of.
If your life becomes unmanageable, it's a problem. Yeah, so you're right, Joe. I agree with that. Yeah, because you like to say there's some healthy addictions. It's just about moderation, isn't it? It's about getting a balance and everything. I'm not against alcohol at all. No. I'm not against it. I just know it.
I suppose, is there a definition that if you didn't have this repetitive behaviour, whatever it is, that you would feel like you were dying, that life wasn't worth living? Because I often check myself out. Am I addicted to this? And then I think, could I do without the internet? Would my life fall apart if the internet went, if Facebook died? And my belief is, no, I'll be fine.
It's suggested try it for a year, then you'll know.
Yeah. But I sort of know already that if it goes, I'd be all right. I wouldn't fall apart. You know, there's that sort of certainty inside of me that and that's how I test out if I'm addicted. If I never have this thing again in my life, will I die?
Yeah, so it's about trying it.
Can you do it?
Try it and see then.
But can you do it? Yeah. Because we all have this theory in our head that we can do something, but can we actually do it? And you know,
well, I would say yes if you sort of like believe it.
But can you? I can tell you stories of thousands of people that have come to me with so much motivation, so much determination, so much I can do this, so much I know I will not die if I stop this. I can tell thousands of stories, not just one, not just two, thousands. And can they do it in that moment? No, because it's much deeper. Now, you might be really sure in this moment, and everybody who stepped through that door for treatment with me that's what got them there. That is the biggest step. However, the journey, as these two ladies are telling you, and that year off, that 3 weeks off, that 3 minutes off, however long it is different to what we say in our mind. And I wanted to just speak to the gene thing, because that's also a kind of theory that goes on in the medical model that doesn't have a illness diagnosis for this properly, as you say, Lorna, and is very much no longer in the NHS, by the way. It's all privatised. But yeah, I sort of used to go down that as a nurse, the gene theory, and over the years I've let go of it, and particularly since I've done my own self-work, deep self-work, I think we all look external for something at some point in our life, and it's not about a gene. It's about we look outwards for some kind of comfort, and if we've not had that, or we've not learned how to adapt that to that as a child, which is where the ACE comes in, the childhood traumas come in as well, and the childhood learning behaviours come in. If we've not learned to adapt to that at an early age, or even in our latter age, then we constantly seek, and that can happen to be anything from, I sucked my thumb until I was 43. Now that did not affect my life. It was not alcohol, it was not drugs, but I sucked my thumb till I was 43. Was I going to die if I stopped sucking my thumb? I knew I wasn't going to die. But it would have changed my life completely, because I had work to do. So for me, and for what I've experienced externally as a treatment provider, a nurse, and friend to many people who've gone through addictions. I see people looking for external gratification. Somebody mentioned, Lorna, you mentioned money earlier while I was driving, sorry about late on the score. And it's where does that drive to succeed topple into addiction, or, you know, where does it become, as Joe said, destructive? Where is that line, you know? Where is it okay to carry on sucking your thumb eternally if it's not causing a problem, but it's still an addiction, isn't it?
There's
You know?
something on that. Yeah.
I actually wrote about sucking the thumb in my book, Jane.
Right?
I need to read it. I've had so much on at the moment, but you are on the list.
Oh,
Well, I'd like to say something about that, because when I think I mentioned the word gene, I'd like to clarify that, because I actually don't even believe that we get our things. I'm a big, and now I lost his name, the guy who says it's not about genes.
Victor Matte. Gabor Matte, sorry, not Victor Matte.
No, but there's several ones, but it doesn't really matter. I use the word to just describe, like, it's a gene. I find if we start looking at words, we start discussion about the meaning of words, and I'm actually Dutch, so my meaning of words sometimes is not even correct for you. So I don't think we should. It doesn't matter whether we call it addiction. It's an umbrella. It's an umbrella word, and so is the gene word if I talk about that. I do believe there's different forms. I do believe societies, if we continue a little bit about alcoholism, society is in total denial, and it's a very difficult subject, because if you don't drink, you're a bore. If you drink too much, you're a loser. I mean, there we are. That's already in too little. And I personally don't. I only married one. Didn't even marry him, was with one alcoholic. I haven't had that in my previous life, although I would say my father always drank a lot, and he still does, but he's not an alcoholic. So you can't even, it's a very difficult subject. And I feel, whether when people come to you, Jane, I understand you're like a counselor or a coach, I don't know, you help people. They are the people who already seek help, which is fantastic. I think, because that's the biggest step, and I dare say Lorna agrees with me, it's the acknowledgement for yourself that you have that problem, and then you seek help. I did seek help when I was with my alcoholic and went to the Al-Anon for a while, and it was hugely helpful for me. So I believe kind of that it's good to seek help. But I also want to get back to what Joe said, with an example. I'm totally addicted to grapefruits. I have one every morning, half, and every evening. And honestly, if I can't get one day, I'm upset. I do also think what Sandy said about, can we live without certain things? I think if they took us, they picked us up, they put us in the middle of the forest, yes, we will survive. I think we all have the survival instinct. So that's, to me, I think our modern society is almost creating all these sort of, that's also, that might be the wrong word again, creating, but it's our Western world where the addictions are so much. I mean, I think people who are in countries in wars, or in countries where women are suppressed, or I mean, I don't think they even think about addiction or those kind of things. They don't have the luxury. So my question now is addiction a luxury? Is that a good question?
Could I answer Sandy's question, please?
Yes.
So you want me to say it again?
No, I've written it down. You said, how would I know when I'm addicted? And my answer would be, when your behavior starts changing drastically in order to relieve your discomfort, and then your instant feeling of relief when you follow the compulsion.
Yeah, very good.
But there's a fine line to draw between not wanting to give something up and OCD. There's a fine line. OCD is another addiction where people have to, everything has to be absolutely rigidly controlled. Everything has to be perfect. Everything has to be done in a certain way. There's a lot of repeating behavior where they go back to make sure the house hasn't caught fire, or they haven't left the gas on, or they've done this or they've done that. And it, in its most severe cases, it can be quite crippling. I read a story about a guy who in the States who was trying to drive from one state to the other, and he kept going back. He kept having he got a quarter of the way there, he had to turn back because he was convinced he'd run somebody over. And then he got half the way there, and he had to turn back. And that's it. That's when it becomes at its most severest state. But it's about the feelings that go with the desire to stop doing something. And if the feelings are very strong, then you have to measure it with the relief that comes in not doing it, or in doing what you wanted to do. And that's a good indication of that you know that you're hooked into something. And it can be like eating half a grapefruit morning and evening. It can be something much bigger.
It can be exercise, it can be meditation, it can be anything, can't it?
It can be anything.
We're talking about safety behaviours, aren't we? We're talking about external safety behaviours. Even OCD, for the person with OCD, it's an external safety behaviour. It's a comfort. It keeps them safe in that present moment. And it can be anything.
I think we need to answer, you know, Gabor Mate says, you know, somebody goes to the doctor and they say, doctor, I'm not feeling very good, or my kid's not feeling very good. And I need something just to, you know, I'm not coping very well. And the doctor dishes out pills. But Gabor Mate says, you know what, the first question the doctor should ask is, tell me about your childhood. Because all of this stems right back to non-attachment with mother, or early attachment with mother, or the behavior that a child witnesses as they're growing up, what it's okay to do and what it's not okay to do. That, and it can be non-verbal, it can be a belief system in the family. We don't talk about feelings, so that's a no-no. So the child has to change its personality in order to get the desired acknowledgement from a parent.
They create a safety behavior. That's
well, they create
my first question as a nurse was always that, before Gabor Mate sort of voiced that. That's always been in early addictions, when we kind of did it without medication and getting people dependent on medication, which is why I'm no longer a nurse, because I don't agree with creating dependency. I think, Renate, you mentioned that beautifully about a dependent society. And I totally feel that that's what society's created. And within that, we have now newer safety behaviours. We have an expansion of things to choose from to fulfill our external things to fulfill our inner needs, or our uncertainties, or the attachment that we've not had as a child, that insecurity that we carry through life, and it changes as we adapt to it. So for some people it's drugs, alcohol, for other people it's thumb sucking, for other people it's addictive relationships. But there's such an array now, you know, and the question should never be about what you are using, what your safety behavior is. If it's OCD, washing your hands, if it's drinking a bottle of vodka before you can leave the house, if it's sucking your thumb because you need to rock yourself to sleep, it should be, as you said, where does that sit? Where does that stem from? Addiction is never about the external resource. It's about the inner feeling. For me, that's my experience of working with people, and my own personal experience. So I agree with everything that's being said, you know, and felt it and I've seen it objectively throughout my years as a psychiatric nurse and addiction nurse. So yeah, I agree with everything that's being said. Is what I'm saying is that I think there's no, it's not simple. It's not simple. It's a whole lot of unlearning, not learning, unlearning, and then finding.
So there's evidence now.
I always use that word, remembering.
Yeah, it's evidence now that we're affected in the womb by our mother's emotions. So, you know, there's scientific evidence to prove that now as well.
I'd like to, I saw both Sandy and Nadia holding up their hands. So I'd like to first go to Sandy and then to Nadia, if we may.
Thank you. I'm practicing my not pushing in. So thank you. One of the things that just sort of expanding on it, that this other thing that I wrote down was this loyalty in family around secrets of addiction. So when you get, oh, sorry, Kelly, thanks, Joe. I'll be brief. The loyalty that happens in family. So if you're the one, like me, like many, I suppose, on this call, who have spotted the propensity in the family to sort of hide this thing that you're going, what is this? And you become the one that becomes the truth speaker. And the loyalty, I so found it so difficult to start to realize, to even share that my dad had this violent behavior towards his family, because I thought it was normal growing up. But then as I started to become brave and share that, it cost me a lot. It cost me dearly. And I see that collusion is absolutely key to keep addictive behaviors going. If you refuse to collude, it upskittles the apple cart and the whole bottom drops out of everybody's world. But for me, and I feel really emotional about this is what's needed, especially now, that we need as wise elder women to speak our truth loudly. We need to get our throat chakra open. We need to really speak our experiences and truth. And that's hard when you've got family members who are going to go burlesque, resistant, and estrange you. That's my experience of being the person who actually held up the finger and said, this is going on. And I know that you've got this going on, Lorna, as well. And I think it's absolutely paramount. The collusion around addiction is just widespread. And I'm curious as to how other people have experienced this.
Okay, thank you, Sandy. I'd like to let Nadia speak now, and after that, Kelly, because someone pointed out that Kelly had her hand up as well, and I'm actually really interested what Kelly likes to say. I love her blogs, actually, and you're in such a different world, so you might have an interesting perspective, Kelly. But first, maybe Nadia can say something.
I think I'd rather listen to Kelly first as well, because I would come away from what Sandy was saying. So yeah. I want to hear what you have to say, Kelly.
Okay, Kelly.
Okay, thank you all. I was a heroin addict. I started drugs when I started smoking pot when I was 10 and LSD when I was 13. And it was not, quite a few members of my family were also addicted, but it was not because, as Cindy was suggesting, that it was all wide open. We were all trying to deal with a family split up and divorce. And for me, addiction is when it's causing a problem. If thumb sucking was not causing me a problem or anyone I loved a problem, then it's not a problem. You know, it might be repetitive behavior and it might be something that's very comforting to me. But for me, I saw so many different reasons for my turning towards drugs. I couldn't deal with reality. I felt displaced. I felt lost, and I wanted out. I wanted to escape. I wanted to be numb. And that's what drugs did for me. And what I've seen I spent a year in a halfway house with other women in recovery and, 12-step programs for years. And what fits for me is that my addictive behaviors, whether it's eating or smoking or whatever, is not either recognizing or being comfortable with what is coming up in that moment for me. And if I can see I'm feeling this, you know, restlessness or aloneness or anger, whatever, then I can see, oh, that's what's triggering me to want to reach out to change this present moment. When I've learned to actually be much more aware of whatever comes up and to be able to just hold that lovingly, then I notice that my reactivity, which is my addictive behavior, is not as powerful. And I also notice that in community cultures where people are much more interdependent, there's much less addiction, or we're just starting to see it coming up in Ladakh, and it's with this new generation of educated kids who don't know what to do. Their parents have never been to a day of school, and now they have masters and PhDs and no jobs and no guidance, and they're lost. You know, and I've seen that time and time again. But when there's a sense of community around an individual, then you see it in the Native American tribes in the US, and many different, not so much anymore, but when somebody was out of line, there was enough community awareness and pressure that brought that person back into the community and into the sense of belonging, and also, you know, the awareness that this is not acceptable, this is not appropriate, there's other ways to deal with things. So I think for me, it seems to me that addiction, I mean, if I look at, I'm granted I haven't been out in your part of the world in a long time, but when I was, this whole telephone thing and the selfies and the, you know, and it's like, wow, you know, you see a family sit down at a restaurant and nobody's looking at each other or talking to each other. They're all on their phones. And for me, that's just, it's horrible. But if they're okay with it and it's not a problem for their family or for themselves, who am I to say that that's an addiction? That's what's okay for them. If my behavior is causing me pain, if I'm struggling with this and trying to stop something, and I want to stop something, that's addictive behavior for me that I'm trying to deal with. But I don't think that we can necessarily judge repetitive behavior with other people and decide whether it's addiction or not. I think it's a much more personal thing when the what do they call them? The alcoholic who just drinks, the binge drinker. That's a really tough one because they can go for a year without drinking, and then they start and they can't stop. And for them, they think, but I can stop. I stopped for a year, you know, so it's a really difficult thing for them to see that behavior as out of their control. All right, I talked a long time. I'm sorry. Thank you for joining me here.
It's interesting, and it kind of sort of what you said about community, that kind of ties in with the world we live in the West. And I do agree with you. If it's not a problem, then, and if you don't do any harm to other people, then there isn't a problem. Yeah, and again, we come down to that word addiction. We could use whatever word we want, in my opinion. And I do think my ex, he's still on my website. He wrote a very poignant entry when he was still drinking, and a week later he went to the AA, but he's a binge drinking alcoholic, and he started again 9 months later, but he was dry for 9 months. But when he wrote that, he had a discussion with himself, and he asked himself, and this could apply to any addiction, I would think, but he used it as an alcohol. He said, so am I addicted? Well, I believe so. So where does this come from? And what has this to do with me? I'm an English teacher, I'm a professional, I'm highly educated. So why does this happen to me? Is it a gene? Well, no, my mother wasn't an alcoholic. My father, I believe, was an alcoholic, but my sister from the same father and mother isn't an alcoholic. I have a brother who's an alcoholic who had a different father. So this whole gene thing, he blew it out of the way. And then he writes, so is this about happiness? So what is this? Why am I doing this? And then he says, well, I can guarantee you that sitting on the beach with 10 cans of lager is not happiness. It's not on my list of being happy. And it's such a minefield. And I think the fact that we're talking about this and the questions we're raising, it's such a big subject, but I personally feel society needs to change and we need to be more open. And I do think, yeah, recognizing that if it is a problem or you're creating a problem for another person, then yes, seek help and do speak up and do talk to people, because that will help. And there are people out there who can help you, I feel. But yeah, like my grapefruit addiction, I'm not going to give it up because I like them and it's doing me probably good instead of bad. So the word of this addiction is neither here nor there. Nadia, would you still like to say something?
Have I got time?
Yes.
Thank you. Well, I wasn't addicted to alcohol or anything like that, but I was addicted to exercise. And it goes back the way that I've unraveled the need to be fit and always being holier than thou, because I was exercising, and then there were people around me who weren't exercising, and of course I was right. And that I realized that we also have an addiction to be right. And so and it always comes as a need to be in control of ourselves and our emotions, because we think that well, we're hurting, but we don't really realize it. So when you've been conditioned and brought up by your parents and conditioned by your schooling and what have you, you come in first of all like this pure little baby who doesn't even know whether they are a girl or boy, and everything is just beautiful and perfect, and then we start to get, so we come fresh from source, but then we're born and we're already inheriting our ancestral patterns without, so those are the things that we then gather, which you could call a mirror of separation from your true source. Well, I mean, to me, I always felt that we are spiritual beings. I've always felt that since I was tiny. So even though I used to get punished a lot and stuff like that, I always used to think it's okay because I get a reward someday. I never knew quite how that was or why. So I was always happy. And, but having said that, living with, for me, it was a very controlling mother. And having been a child from a divorce. So to me, it was normal. It was normal to be beaten. It was normal to be verbally abused. It was normal. So I just loved her. And to me, it was just like, this is how life is, like most of you will understand. And then as I got older, other stuff started to happen to me, like my sons were born with, with disabilities, or one died. And I knew the only way that I could control my emotional state was by being strong. And by being strong, the only way that I could seek to do that was through exercising and being really ultra fit. I mean, they used to nickname me a six-pack Nad at some point, because I thought, well, if I'm strong physically, nothing can hurt me, and I can just forge through whatever it is that I have to deal with in life. Yeah. And it made me quite a tough guy, and I had no patience. I had no patience for anybody who tended to be weak or feeble, or, and I said, well, just go and do this or do that, and I realized, until I've just finished a 5-day retreat now, I've held anger, and anger was the one big whammy that I've not been able to get rid of. But my body, I have to go back a little bit. My body actually stopped me in my track. And my body stopped me by causing arthritis in my hips. I ended up, you know, I used to go into my circuit training classes with a walking stick because I had to give people circuit training instead of doing a class because I was in such agony. I could no longer walk. So my body was telling me, look at yourself. You know, I didn't know that then, but now I know, you know, and looking back. So I wrote a little book called True to My Roots. And in that book, it's just an abbreviation of everything that happened. But basically, I learned through my body that I needed to listen and heed it and respect it. And so I was forced to retire. I was forced to stop exercising. So when women reach menopause, they tell you, oh, you must exercise because that will help you. I had to stop everything because my whole body had become crooked. And that was because I was just forging through. No matter what, I was going to stay strong. I couldn't get hurt. And, you know, it's like Kelly was saying that, but when you begin to realize that this is a repetitive pattern that you own, and you start to be present with it, you start to recognize that that's what it is. You start to love it gently, and you then it makes you softer, you know. And it took me years to get softer. And this anger, the anger that I felt was directed at one of the people who was leading the retreat. And because she was talking about softness, gentleness, exquisiteness. And I thought, if she says that one more time, I'm going to kill her now. And I just knew that I had hit my mirror of separation big time. That was the whole reason why I joined the retreat, and it was to clear the anger. Well, I think it's diffusing. So I can just share that with you. So this is all part of an addiction that, and it's everything. It doesn't have to be alcohol. It doesn't have to be, it's just the fact that we need to be able to control our emotions in order to survive in life. And we turn to whatever we need to turn to. You know, in my case, it was exercise, it was drugs and alcohol, it's food. It's all the same thing. It's an addiction because we think that's the only way we can control ourselves and our emotions and be happy. And
Nadia,
it doesn't actually.
Sorry to interrupt you, Nadia. We're a little bit.
Time.
I don't know if we have to stop exactly at 11 o'clock, Steffi, the UK time, or if we can go a little bit further. But I saw something interesting from Kathleen Micah, and also Lorna said, I would like to hear how you're doing that. And maybe this might be, if Kathleen is willing to talk a little bit about that, to sort of round up this. Should we already round it up? Because what she's saying is that she tried to take the stigma out of addiction. And I think that would be a perfect sort of ending to this addiction talk, if you all agree with me, because I don't want to sort of take.
Yes.
Yeah. Can we just acknowledge Nadia for that beautiful share there?
I acknowledge Nadia too. Nadia knows that I love Nadia.
Thank you. But I do agree that it all goes back to loving yourself and knowing your true source and your true authenticity. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadia.
Okay, we can keep going for as long as you all are happy to keep going.
Okay.
I have to go at 11, so.
Okay. Kathleen, would you like to share a little bit about your story? You are still muted.
There we go. I'm a little technologically inept here. I think it just started actually a couple of years ago. I work in a clinic. Passamaquoddy has two tribes, one on the East Coast and one in the center of, or inland. So I work for both of the tribes, and it started a couple of years ago, and they sent all the behavioral health people to an addiction training. And one of the purposes of that training was to try to take the stigma out of the addiction, to treat it more like a mental illness and not a weakness in personality or a character flaw. So the first step was to take certain words out of our clinic. So things like even sober are not actually used very often in our clinic. We use things like well-briety for, you know, a better sort of less stigma word. So that's where they started, just changing the words that we use and sort of seeping it in through that way. So that's just the beginning. So, sorry if I don't have any more that you're interested in. I can get in touch with the behavioral health people and find some other things that they're doing, but that's the one that was most interesting to me when they all came back.
Can I just say something? Sorry.
Go ahead.
Did I hear correctly? You said you worked with tribal people?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Well, the problem, there's a huge amount of addiction with tribal people, unfortunately, because if you go back to the fact that they have had their land stolen, they've had their lives turned upside down throughout the centuries, and still today they are polarized from other people. There's a huge, people, you know, have a huge divide about people who are tribal based or people who are from that kind of cultural society. There's still a huge stigma against them. So it's not surprising that because of the abandonment and the loss and all the trauma that they have suffered over the centuries, that wherever you are, whether you're in the US or Canada or wherever you find tribal nations, there is a huge amount of addiction, because you know, this is just as a cultural, as a people who lived a certain way of lifestyle, and that was torn away from them. It's inevitable, unfortunately.
Yes, we have a huge, huge problem on both reservations. We've actually started our own treatment programs on the reservation, so they have more control over it.
But it's about trauma, you see. I mean, in an ideal world, they would be up for trauma therapy, for being treated for trauma, because it is a huge trauma that they have suffered. Thank you.
Each clinic has a huge behavioral health program, and there are many natives that are the counselors. So there's a lot of work going on around it, and there's a lot of awareness of the historical trauma. A lot of recordings have been done, well, I shouldn't say a lot, a couple recordings have been done, documentaries on the trauma of the Passamaquoddy people.
Thank you.
Sandy?
Yeah, thank you. Just, it occurs to me to just share this, that I've known for some time, that the word community, we sort of like have this, or it's an inquiry. Maybe we have this idealistic thing around community, and the social norms, the both spoken rules and unspoken rules in community don't always serve everybody in it. And I just wrote down here briefly that if one person in a community is not in peace and fulfillment and enjoyment, the community is unhealthy at some level. And I sort of get this, and I had an experience of being in a practical session where the whole of like a group of 24 people had to create something out of their creativity, rather than their moving away from something that they didn't want. I can't articulate it very well. And I was amazed that everybody at the end of the process, which took roughly 45 minutes, we created something that everybody was happy with. They'd all participated in, they'd all added to this creation, and it was magical. And it was born through a creative process that I was facilitated to participate in. And for me, it's the creativity, that the unknown, the parts of us that don't know, are going to help to create communities who have got everybody's needs met, nobody's having to compromise, and all can participate in. And for me, that is a wonderful vision that I hold for us all, really. Thank you for letting me articulate that.
That's a great finishing share, Sandy, because you're spot on. Spot on. The gift is in, that's the gift of creation, is in that addictions. The gifts are in there, if we can just find them.
Lorna, would you like to add something? I just wrote, I thought you said you have to also leave
I do.
Sure.
I do.
Okay. Maybe you want to
knock at the door because I'm getting a lift.
Yeah, I don't know if more people would like to continue, or if you are all happy that we rounded up now. Maybe we rounded up. Are you all happy with that? Lorna, maybe you can speak.
I'll just say thank you all for coming. It's been brilliant. Loved hanging out with you all. Love you all.
Love you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming, and thank you, Lorna and Renate, particularly, but everybody who shared. It was really great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.